Stokes. Thank you for inviting me to speak to you today. This symposium is held to celebrate, as you all know, the 70th anniversary of the Greater East Asian Conference held here in Tokyo in November 1943 at the height of World War II. I am very honored to be able to participate in this historic moment in Tokyo 70 years later. Now, one of the most surprising developments, a large theme, in the 20th century has been the sheer speed at which the 500-year of colonialism came to an end. Ruled by white men like me, figured out in mid-air. No one seems to have expected this. Nehru, the Indian leader, when asked in the late 1930s how long he thought it would take for India to gain or regain its independence, then should he given that independence might come, he did it right, in the 1970s. In other words, 30 years, 40 years later, well after Nehru's time, he wasn't taking responsibility for it. By the early 1940s, however, it was becoming very obvious that the Indians themselves were not going to be patient that long. What had happened to concertina all expectation? The simple answer is the Second World War had broken out, and it had shown that one relative newcomer to the world stage, guess who, in the 500-year drama, was capable of delivering enormous blows, body blows to colonialism, and that was Japan. Thus, the Nehru timetable of independence for India by the 1970s gave way to a much tighter timetable, namely as soon as World War II ended. Let us go back in time, taking a broad history. Let us go back in time from the 20th century to the early 17th century, to the start of all this. In India, it was India, my country. In India, Britain established the East India Company in 1600 and started their colonial rule. Britain further branched out its East Indian Company to Madras in 1637, to Bombay in 1661, to Calcutta in 1690. The virus spread very swiftly. The British invasion of India continued with these landmark events we all know about in school. The Battle of Plassey in 1764, the Mysore War in 1799, and the siege revolt in 1845. Then there was the famous Sepoy Revolt, which took place from 1857 to 1859. That was an anti-British civilian rebellion. In the midst of this UK oppression of India, over here, the Meiji Restoration took place in Japan in 1868. In India, at roughly that same time, let us know, some historical figures in the struggle for Indian independence were born. Thus, Mahatma Gandhi was born in 1867 and and Chandra Bose in 1897. In 1877, the Indian Empire, featuring direct colonial rule of the whole of India by the British, was founded. And Queen Victoria came to the throne as the, quote, Empress of India, unquote. In other words, Bose was born at the peak of British colonial rule of India. Bose is called Netaji in India even now. Netaji means great leader. With Japan's support, Bose formed the INA, the Indian National Army, a crucial unit. Unlike Gandhi, who fought against British colonial rule, using the philosophy of nonviolence, Bose fought in battle. As a commander, he was a tall man, I understand. On May 16, 1943, Bose came to Japan and met Japanese leaders. Navy Minister Shimada, Chief of Navy General Staff Nagano, Prime Minister Shigemitsu. And then to Capitol, he met the Prime Minister, Hideki Tojo. Bose kept his address. He made a special speech at the Year Public Hall. And his message, which I'm going to quote from now, I think it's very important, sums up the feeling of Asian people at that time. He said, quote, when I started going to elementary school, just then, a country of Asian race fought against one of the world's largest white empires, Russia. This Asian country defeated Russia completely, and this country was Japan. When this news, this is Bose speaking, these are his words, when this news reached all across India, a wave of excitement covered the entire land, says Bose, recalling that time. At every corner of my country, he said, people enthusiastically talked about the Battle of Fort Arthur, the Battle of Maktan, and the thrilling story of the Battle of Tsushima. Bose continued, Indian children honestly adore Abrotolo and General Modi. Parents of those Indian kids competed to buy the pictures of Admiral Togo and General Modi, and often did so in vain. There weren't enough of them. Instead, says Bose, they bought something Japanese, anything with a Japanese flavor, from the market, and ornamented their houses with Japanese things. Bose clearly said, quote, big quote for this one, Japan was the light of hope for Asia, unquote. He further continued, this time, Japan declared war against Britain, long-time enemy of India. Japan, he said, has given us the best opportunity to be independent. We realize its significance, and we thank Japan, said Bose, from the bottom of our hearts. Quote, once we miss the opportunity, we would never be able to have the same opportunity for another 100 years or more. Bose continued, victory is in our hands, and we firmly believe India will accomplish our goal of being independent. However, what really counted was action, not talk. In October of 1943, which was the 66th year since Queen Victoria came to the throne as the Empress of the Indian Empire, the provisional government of Free India was established. At the convention that did the Establishment Act, which was held in Singapore, Stokes was nominated as the head, the Supreme Commander, by unanimous applause. Stokes declared, "Chalo Delhi," that was his slogan, which means, "On to Delhi." He and his people held up a board on which the same message was written, and they marched in the street of Singapore, I see. It was a historical start of the march heading for their homeland, India. INI, or Indian National Army officers and soldiers, together with the Japanese army, headed for Imphal, passing the border of Burma and India, shouting, "On to Delhi." Both encouraged officers and men, saying, quote, "Raise our national flag on the red fort of Delhi." Thus, the provisional government of Free India, together with Japan, was in a position to declare war against Britain and America. In the fall of the same year, 1943, that Greater East Asian Conference was held from November 5 for 6 days in Tokyo. This was, believe it or not, and I find it pretty incredible, this was the first summit of colored races held for the first time in the long history of humanity. A lot of meetings took place at that time. Prime Minister Hideki Tojo met leaders from other Asian countries. They were Han Jinghui, Prime Minister of Manchuria, Wang Jingwei, Chairman of the Nanking government, China, Jose P. Laurel, President of the Philippines, Bao, Prime Minister of Burma, and so it goes on. Prince Van Waitakon, Acting Prime Minister of Thailand. They all gathered together, with Subhas Chandra Bose attending as a representative of India. Today, not a few Japanese scholars, some of whom may be here tonight, I hope so, regard this conference as if it were the gathering of the Japanese military's, quote, puppet government, unquote, leaders for propaganda purposes. But Japanese leaders are in themselves the puppets, quote unquote, of foreign powers which intend to control the mind of the Japanese people. At the conference, the Great East Asian Joint Declaration was approved unanimously. And both, coming back to his role at the conference, said, "Let this declaration be not only for fellow Asians, but also for the people of the whole world who are suffering from suppression as under the Charter for Equality of Human Rights." As both proclaimed, Japan was, quote, "the light of hope," unquote, for non-white people in the world. The world history of the past 500 years, to remind you, is a grand drama of the Western class of white Christians ruling over the nations of colored races and their colonies. In historical context, Japan is an nation Prime Minister Hughes of White Australia left the conference saying he would reject signature altogether, and he went home. The chairman of that conference was the then US President, Woodrow Wilson. He demanded that the Japanese representative withdraw his proposal. He said this matter was an issue which should be treated quietly. Very quietly indeed. Baron Nobuaki Makino, however, the chief Japanese representative and a former Japanese foreign minister, declined to follow Chairman Wilson's demand, and he requested a vote. Although Britain, America, Poland, Brazil, and Romania opposed, 11 countries, mostly smaller ones, out of 16 countries attending, voted for the Japanese proposal. Thus, the proposal won a majority and was approved. However, Chairman Wilson, as president of the gathering, announced that the voting itself was invalid because it was not a, quote, solid vote, unquote. However, things didn't stop there. Makino still demanded that the conference accept the majority vote. But Wilson insisted that, quote, important issues like this one required a solid vote in the past. At least no objection is needed to proceed with the meeting, i.e. to give up this topic. Despite the fact that the proposal for abolishing racial discrimination was approved by an overwhelming majority of 11 to 5, Chairman Wilson, the US President, ignored the voting results. He brushed it aside. Such behavior would be unacceptable in today's world. Now, the President of the United States is black. Such a thing was totally unbelievable back then. The Japanese are not white, they are the colored people. So the proud Japanese were not able to overlook such white high-handedness on Wilson's part. Turning now to the case of Indonesia, colonial rule began there when the Dutch dispatched their navy to Indonesia in 1596. 350 years, a huge span or so of colonial rule by the Dutch, ended in 1942 when the Japanese army marched into Indonesia. The Dutch surrendered in just 7 days. An Indonesian legend has it that God's soldiers, led by a hero riding a white horse, helped Indonesia to become independent. Well, for the Indonesians, Japan's advance reminded Indonesians of the cunning of those legendary God's soldiers. The Japanese army was the army of myth, they thought. Dr. George Ryu Sanford Kanahele raises 4 points as to Japan's role in his book entitled, quote, Japanese military rule and Indonesian independence, unquote. What were the main points of this? 1. The Japanese banned the use of Dutch and English in official life. Thus, Indonesian spread as the official language of Indonesia. 2. The Japanese gave military training to Indonesian youth. Thus, young Indonesians, the kids, learned strict rules, endurance, and courage. A third crucial point, the Japanese swept away the Dutch authorities and gave high posts to Indonesians. The fourth point, Japanese established PUTA as a civil organization and Hokokai, a voluntary service society, in Java, and built up its network and chapters across the country. Thus, the Japanese taught Indonesians how to operate these nationwide network organizations. It is widely said that Japan invaded Asian countries during World War II. But if so, how come the invaded country provided military training to the youth of the country being invaded? The Japanese trained the mental power of Indonesians, gave them high position, and helped them build nationwide organizations where people got together to unite. And the Japanese side taught them how to manage such organizations. These facts certainly prove that Japan was not the country which invaded Indonesia. I'm delighted to hear your approval. It is correct to say that Japan made all the efforts possible to let Asian countries be independent. Independent from whom? Of course, from the rule of the Western countries which colonized Asia. At the center of Jakarta is Merdeka Park. Merdeka means independence in Indonesian. Besides raising statues of Japanese Commander Hatta and Sukarno, the Indonesians raised a 37-meter tall memorial tower of independence in that Merdeka Park. If you go there, on the first floor of the basement, there's the original statement of the Declaration of Independence, on which we can find the signatures of Hatta and Sukarno together. And on this document, the Independence Day is recorded as 17-8-05. 17-8 that is, means all this 17, the date of independence. But what about 05, meaning the year 5? Many Indonesians are Muslims, but it is not an Islamic calendar. Needless to say, it is not a Christian calendar. Then what is this 05, the year of 5? 05, the year of 5, in fact, is, according to the Japanese imperial calendar, the year 1945 is, according to the Japanese imperial calendar, the 2,605th year since the first Emperor Jinmu came to the imperial throne and founded Japan officially. Thus, Hatta and Sukarno used Japan's imperial calendar to express their gratitude to Japan, for Japan was the mother of Indonesia's independence. Yes, I want to quote that too. Thus, they used Japan's imperial calendar to celebrate their Independence Day in their Declaration of Independence document itself. Ladies and gentlemen, this tale we have told of 500 years of colonialism is widely known now all over the world. Nevertheless, we are gathered today to celebrate the end of the curse of colonialism. Japan is the country of the rising sun. Joining hands together with the fellow Asian people who desire a truly free Asia, I sincerely hope that Japan will play a vital role for realizing democratic Asian unity. Hoping that the sun will rise again, I would like to conclude my speech. Thank you very much